Hey, this is Sky Nelson from the Synchronicity Institute. I wanted to talk about the amazing, obviously the World Cup was amazing in the finals, and that Lionel Messi and Lamine Yamal would play each other after this photo that was taken 20 years ago of the two of them when Lamine was a baby. It's a synchronicity because it's an amazing coincidence that happened, but people wonder what's the likelihood, and I want to talk to you about the likelihood. We can calculate it. So synchronicities like this are, they seem like 1 in a billion. Let's figure out what that really means. So I think instead of asking whether it was chance, just chance, or some kind of meaningful coincidence, we need to ask a different question. Just simply, what's the best explanation for this occurrence? Is it better to explain it by chance, or is it better to seek for some other meaningful principle? And I'm going to show you what I think. So many people tend to be casually causal, meaning they're like casually thinking that they just assume the world is physically connected and there's no other influences. And I'm a physicist. I don't think there are other influences besides the forces, but we need to look at information carefully to understand what's possible. So without too much thought, we might just think, there's no causal connection, there can't be any relationship. It just seems mystical. So let's calculate the realisticness of this situation. What are the odds these two will ever meet again in a World Cup final? We have to ask the forward-looking question. We can't look back retrospectively and post-select, knowing that they met in the end, knowing the future, look back at the past. We have to start from the past and look forward and say, what are the odds these two will ever meet again, given that they met at the photo shoot with the little bath situation. So that allows us to look from a causal point of view. And that Lionel Messi would be playing in Barcelona, and his mother would sign him up for a raffle, that she would win the raffle, and Messi would be randomly assigned to Yamal. This is all hindsight. So we want to start from there. Given that situation, start from there and look forward. What's the likelihood that they ended up playing together at the World Cup? So we start with this. About 250,000 baby boys were born in Spain in 2007. I just looked that up. About 800 of every 1,200 players were new this year, or about 2/3 of them of each team is new every 4 years. So each team is about 26 players, so on average about 18 new players every 4 years, or 5 players every year that are new. So just do some basic assumptions that are simple, that don't throw it off too much even if they're wrong. 5 new players every year, let's say. The odds of any one of these new babies being the one photographed with the star are about 5 in 250,000. So we said there's 250,000 baby boys. There's 5 of them new to a team every year in Spain. So that's 1 in 50,000 chance that one of these, the boy in the photo, would grow up to be a soccer star. So we use Bayesian reasoning to multiply the odds of one thing times the odds of a second unrelated thing. So we have to consider this is not a random baby, given that Yamal's family loves football enough to have entered a raffle, be photographed with a player. He's living in Catalonia, which is among the best academy ever and anywhere. So we need to increase our likelihood by some factor. He's not just a random kid growing up to be a soccer player, but say a factor of 10 greater that he's among the 10% of the most likely Spanish citizens to grow up and become a pro player. He's got the circumstances not only to live in a great place drawn towards that and a culture drawn towards that, but he's also got the circumstances to do that, but the resources to follow that path. So it seems like a generous factor, a factor of 10, and so we can take our 1 to 50,000 becomes 1 in 5,000. So there's a 1 in 5,000 odds that he will grow up to be a soccer star, this kid in the photo, this little baby. Looking forward. So now, conditional probability, further, we say Yamal not only had to become world class and join the Spanish World Cup team, he had to do so in the soonest possible time frame, while Messi was still playing. So there are 37 players under 21 among the 1,200 players at this year's World Cup, or about a 1 in 60 chance. Now this isn't quite the right metric, so I'm just going to call it 1 in 30 chance to be generous with the assumptions. So 1 in 30 chance of Yamal being among the youngest players on the World Cup. And multiplying this by the previous amount, 1 in 30 by 1 in 5,000, we have 1 in 150,000. That he would grow up to be not only a soccer player, pro player, but also as a teenager. In time to catch Messi. Now, what's the chances that Messi would still be playing? According to some basic research on Transfermarkt website, there's about 50 players around Messi's age since the year 2000. He's 39 this year. Is that right? 39? Yeah. And about 50 players since the year 2000 in the last 7 tournaments. So with about 1,200 players every 4 years, 7 tournaments, that's 8,400 players. So about 50 out of 8,400 players that are old enough to be Messi, let's call that, it's less than a percent, but let's call it 1%. Or 1 in 100 chance that Messi is still playing when Yamal is old enough to play in the World Cup. So we're almost there. We've got Yamal playing on a pro team in his late teens at the same time that Messi is still playing. And we finally have to consider the fact that Argentina played Spain in the finals. They're both elite teams, so let's just say a 1 in 6 chance of making it to the final, each of them. That's pretty good. Together, you multiply those probabilities, you get 1 in 36. So the question is this 1 in a billion? Let's see. And we have 1 in 150,000 for the chance that Yamal would grow up to be a pro soccer player in Spain in time to meet Messi, who's 1 out of 100 chance that he would be still playing, and 1 in 36 chance that they would play each other in the finals. That comes to 1 in 540 million. So not bad, except that's not the end of the story. So the key thing here when you consider synchronicity is that it could have been any of us. It could have been any of those players in the league. You have to think subjectively. That one person had this 154 million chance to make that situation happen, but any one of them could have taken a photo and had fast forward and had this situation, synchronicity, happen. So we have to think subjectively, like there's many worlds in which each of us is living our own life, and what's the chances of any one of us having this experience? It's going to be much higher. We use a Poisson distribution for this. We say there's a peaked distribution, a very narrow peak of 1 in 540 million. That's a very narrow peak. But there's still a tail on either end. So there's a likelihood that 1 or maybe 2 or more people would actually have this experience, given the number of people that are actually playing. Now, I said 1,200 players in the tournament, but let's say there's only 10% of them do actual photo shoots for promos. Let's say, I don't know, but I'm just guessing. So it's 120 players in our sample space that could have actually had this experience. So we say of those 120 players, each having a 1 in 540 million chance, the distribution of the Poisson distribution gives us after 7 tournaments, 840 players, the Poisson distribution gives us a 1 in 600,000 chance, or 0.0001%, that somebody, not just Yamal, but somebody would have this experience. So we got 1 in 600,000, or 0.0001%, or about 1% of 1%. So here's the key point. Here's the bottom line. If you're a causal person, you believe this is just destined to happen to somebody, you're saying, I believe more in a theory that predicts 1% of 1% of the time that this is the correct answer. The fact that it happened is not consistent with a model that's causality, in the sense that it's not a very good explanation. Sure, it could be causality, but it happens so seldom that it's not likely. In science, we usually have like a 5% threshold. If the explanation is within 5% of what you of the time you get the right answer, then, or less than that, then you think it's a bad explanation. And this is 1% of 1% of the time you get the right answer from this theory of causality, and so it's just not a good explanation. I like to think a little bit differently. It's not a force causing this interaction and this connection. It's a informational relationship. Plato, I think, talked about final cause, the idea that not only do you have an initial cause leading outward, spreading outwards in the world, but a final cause that things are drawn towards. And Carl Jung talked about synchronicity, meaningful coincidences. I think we have a situation where you have many different possible paths for the reality of the world, and there's some calculations that can be done to show how the most meaningful outcomes do align in a sort of anti-chaotic way, or a meaningful way, bringing about situations that are meaningful and a reflection of what we're actually valuing or putting out there in the world. not valuing in good or bad terms, but in terms of what we believe and how we act, what we like and love in the world. So I think it's a hopeful theory and a hopeful situation that shows us that the world is actually responding to us, and we can count on situations that surprise us and blow our minds, but are actually just part of the way the universe works to show us reflections of what we care about. And if you think about what else we care about in the world and have belief that we can be pleasantly surprised by life, even when things seem highly unlikely, and these are the things in your life and in the world that seem highly unlikely, like peace on earth. Let ourselves be surprised, because there are surprises out there unfolding that we can't even fathom right now. And until they happen, we can't look back and say we know they're going to happen. We just have to be ready for them and witness them and appreciate them when they come and take advantage, and be ready for positive outcomes. So thanks for listening into this explanation. I like thinking about the actual explanation of what synchronicity could be, not just saying it's meaningful coincidence and end of story, not just saying it's causality, end of story, but really trying to understand what is this trying to show us about the world, and how can we make the world a better place from it. Thanks. Sky Nelson, Synchronicity Institute, author of Living in Flow.